So what is cap and trade? Government sets a limit or cap on the total amount of carbon dioxide that can be emitted into the atmosphere. Emissions above that level result in fines. Permits to emit CO2 get distributed to industry to cover their emissions. The initial allotment is set slightly below current emission levels to force companies to pollute less. If a company can reduce its pollution below the amount of credits it already has, it can sell those credits to some other company that's not doing so well in reducing theirs. This system essentially creates an economic market where polluters have financial incentive to reduce pollution in the form of spare credits, which can be sold or traded. Over time, the cap can be reduced, hopefully at predictable intervals so everyone can prepare for it, further constraining the amount of pollution that industry can emit. The Waxman-Markey bill will impose new standards to produce green energy. 1. It'll establish renewable electricity standard. The new RES requires utilities to produce an increasing percentage of their electricity from a combination of renewable energy and energy efficiency savings. The bill designates renewable sources as wind, solar, geothermal, biomass, marine and hydrokinetic energy, biogas, and biofuels. The RES requires that 6% of electricity come from renewables by 2012, gradually increasing to 20% by 2020. Second, reduce emissions. Targeting levels recorded in 2005 that by 2012 we have to reduce emissions by 3%, by 2020 by 17%, by 2030 by 42%, and by 2050 by 83%. Third, we have to issue emission permits. 85% are going to be given away, declining over time. 15% are going to be auctioned off, and that'll increase over time. The permit to emit 1 ton of CO2 is worth about $11 to $15 in 2012. They'll be worth about $22 to $28 in 2025. The value of all permits will be worth about $60 billion in 2012, and the value of all permits will be worth about $113 billion in 2025. Exchange for trading credits. Essentially, what will happen if the Senate can pass either the House-approved Waxman-Markey bill or an existing Lieberman-Warner-Boxer bill that has been discussed in the Senate, is the new greenhouse gas credit exchange will virtually appear overnight. The government will seed the market with credits, distributed across all major industries. Those companies that cannot reduce greenhouse gas emissions below federally mandated levels will need to purchase credits through an exchange much like the stock market, which obtains credits from companies who have reduced their emissions below mandated levels. The thinking is that by giving companies a financial incentive to reduce emissions, many will stay compliant. Companies unable to stay below emission standards will pay a heavy price. Sitting in the middle of all this will be emission credits brokers, reaping a huge windfall in fees artificially created by this new government-mandated monstrosity. The result is that $1 trillion government entity will be created overnight. Previously non-existent government bureaucracies would be instantly created. There would be about $190 billion diverted to energy technology and efficiency measures through 2025. There'll be a new Cash for Clunkers program offering credits to buy electric or hybrid vehicles. The Congressional Budget Office projects the government will receive about $1.2 trillion in revenue through 2018. Estimates say that 100% of the burden will come from consumers in the form of higher energy costs. The cost of every good whose production requires electricity will have to increase. U.S. production will drop as companies strain to lower emission output. Materials that would normally be available won't exist. Conservative estimates predict a drop in gross domestic product (GDP) of 4 to 6%. Wait a second, that couldn't possibly be right. It could only be right-wing scare tactics to derail the president's clean energy agenda. The president's for the little guy, isn't he? Shame on the president's opponents who would accuse him of orchestrating such Orwellian financial hardship to industry and consumers crippling an economy already suffering on an historic level.
Under my plan of a cap and trade system, electricity rates would necessarily skyrocket. Even, regardless of what I say about whether coal is good or bad, because I'm capping greenhouse gases, coal-powered plants, natural gas, you name whatever the plants were, whatever the industry was, they would have to retrofit their operations. That will cost money. They will pass that money on to consumers.
Coal produces almost 50% of the electricity used in the U.S. All renewables combine for less than 3%, and no single source produces more than 20% of all electricity. Look at the breakdown by state. As we can see, the average price per kilowatt and the overall percentage of that state's electricity coming from coal. The states colored in green have an average price below 9 cents per kilowatt. The red states have a price above 9 cents, and the blue states get most of their power from hydro. You will see a direct correlation between the higher the percentage of energy coming from coal generation as having the lowest cost. So if you live in one of the states that derives more than 2/3 of your electricity from coal generation, that would be you, Indiana, West Virginia, Ohio, Iowa, Kentucky, Nebraska, Missouri, Colorado, North Dakota, Wyoming, and New Mexico. You are closest to the crosshairs when the president pulls the trigger on your pocketbook. Politics aside, how do you feel about being singled out for planned financial hardship because of the president's green agenda?
Whatever technologies are out there that are being presented, whatever power plants that are being built, that they would have to meet the rigors of that market and the ratcheted down caps that are imposed every year. So if somebody wants to build a coal-powered plant, they can. It's just that it will bankrupt them because they're going to be charged a huge sum for all that greenhouse gas that's being emitted.
So there you have it. President Obama is going to bankrupt the industry responsible for generating over half the electricity in the U.S. Recall what happened to Spain as a result of their well-intended but financially crippling pursuit of green energy? It is not enough to put us on a course to mimic Spain, which is suffering unemployment of 20% overall and 45% for people under 25. That was just due to lower amounts of available electricity that cost more to produce. President Obama is going to levy fatal financial penalties on a staple U.S. industry that provides the resource we need to run every device we use on a daily basis. The fact that he is supporting the building of electric and hybrid cars is an especially ironic twist. Voters need to wake up before cap and trade gets on the books. Unless you're a fan of public transportation, reading by candle, and washing and drying your clothes by hand.